Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who knows the difference between Frankenstein and his monster. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello, you're darn right I do. You're darn right
do.
I do. AP English has taught me that difference.
Is that all they taught?
That's it.
They just kept
over
having the two things on the board.
Yeah.
This is one thing, this is the other thing.
Like, hello, Mr. Thompson from The Simpsons. Like, which is the monster? Taps on foot. Yes, that's how they did it. That was it. That was the entire test.
I think he's talking to you. So today's show, the Frankenstein reference at the top of the show is because the US soccer presidential election is coming. Bear with me, we'll get there. There are 8 candidates. It happens on Saturday. What we're going to do is
One
instead
of them is
of
Frankenstein.
It is a late
It's
entry.
monster.
He got the nominations. What we're going to do is take the best parts of each candidate's platform and build a Frankenstein's monster of a US soccer candidate.
Sure.
But it won't be a monster. It'll be a friendly Frankenstein's monster that will rule over US soccer for the next 4 years.
And for those who are wondering why we haven't gone Voltron, it's because we both just admitted to each other before recording that neither of us really knows who Voltron is. And in my defense, it's because that aired between 84 and 85. I was born in 84. So
Okay.
I don't really have that many memories from when I was 8 months old.
And I'm from foreign.
There you go.
I don't think we had Voltron.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So shall we do this right? We're going to do our sort of best parts of each candidate. It's not going to be as gruesome as a Frankenstein thing. It's really just about...
I hope not.
Well, the reason I want to do it, actually, to get to this, is whoever wins... It's going to be someone with some interesting ideas. It's going to be different and I would argue better than what we have right now. And I really mean that. Whomever wins, if we're going to be pedantic about things today.
I agree with that mostly.
And I also think that whomever wins is going to hopefully pull parts from other candidates' platforms and maybe implement those. So this is sort of the happy show where you think about the positive future after the US soccer presidential election.
Well, I would also add, if you look at the individual platforms from all of the different candidates, there's a lot of overlap. And so I know we're probably going to hear from some people if I say, I like, looking at this, like Hope Solo's idea about transparency. There's going to be 7 other candidates who have transparency ideas that sort of overlap, and that's because that is a popular thing amongst the voting blocks.
So we haven't really compared notes, have we? We've done this separately. It's as if there were 2 Dr. Frankensteins making competing monsters, and then they try and merge it into one. This isn't going to go well. I've gone with sort of whoever's been most vocal or whoever first got my attention with that specific platform. But yes, it's a good caveat, Taylor, to point out that a lot of these platforms or these issues are shared across many candidates. Yep. Everyone wants American soccer to be better. We can say that.
Yeah.
But we're going to get more specific. All right, let's start carving up some platforms.
That sounds good for me. The way I chose to approach this was basically some issues that I have felt were long-standing issues combined with some things that I had never thought of before that I was like, ooh, that's an interesting idea.
Yes, I've had a few of those too.
Okay.
Yeah, that's been my experience reading everybody's manifestos, platforms, whatever they're calling them. Yeah.
And I'm going to start off with the money.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed Eric.
Show me the money, Taylor.
I really enjoyed Eric Winaldo's idea of the internal treasury bank. We talked
Yes.
about that when he released the first of his manifestos and plans for U.S. soccer.
Yeah, there was a promise of more policy papers, and we haven't, unless we've missed them. I've been keeping an eye out. I haven't seen them. I really hoped we'd see them before Saturday.
Me too.
Yeah.
Not sure what to make of that. Maybe we'll talk about that later on.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Towards the end of the show, we're going to sort of explain how the actual day of voting will work, how it's structured, and what we know about how we think things will go. That's towards the end of today's show. Excuse me, Taylor.
Oh, you're good. So basically, this was an idea that with the internal treasury bank, you could start providing loans to clubs or organizations or whatever who needed financing. Maybe that was a bridge loan. Maybe that was just a straight up loan where you could maybe give them a better rate. And the idea, and this is why I thought it was so practical, it was aimed at U.S. soccer financing instead of funding, because so many of the plans we've seen are like, we've got this $150 million, which maybe we do, maybe some of it's already spent, maybe some of it is already earmarked, and so this would be a way to
maybe it's Canadian dollars. Who knows?
So maybe this would be a way to raise money by maybe collecting a little bit of interest, but also building new projects that you then get involved in actual development of the physical game. I liked that a lot.
I think it's a good idea. So to follow up on that, I also like Eric Winaldo's other idea, which was the endowment spending policy, which was to have the chunk of money that you basically invest to grow the amount, but then you just keep skimming 5% out of that amount.
Skimming is a bad word, but
sorry, but you know what I'm saying. You keep taking 5%, withdrawing 5% from that big fund, and it continually grows, but you continually are able to then redistribute it. I really like that idea.
Yeah.
It's weird because that's not the thing that Eric Winaldo is famous for in this election, and I would argue, looking at the way that sort of manifesto part was written, I think it's part of his team essentially wrote the text for that, but it's Winaldo's platform, and it's a good idea, and I like it. it.
Yeah, but I think, again, with Ronaldo, I mean, unless you have more from him, I don't have that much more because he's talked about aligning with the European calendar or about promotion and relegation, but I haven't seen a lot of actual plans about how he intends to accomplish that.
Right.
Again, that's why we wanted to see more documentation. So, I do have pro-rel in here, but it's from different candidates.
All right, you said the magic words. I'm going to start us off then.
Okay.
I'm going to start carving up some pro-rel plans.
Sure.
Here's what I would do. I would take...
There's going to be a lot of overlap right now.
I think so too. We had a phone conversation about this as well, right? I would take the short-term pro-rel plan, the short-term plan of Michael Winograd.
Okay.
When he was on the show a couple of days ago, and also I believe he's put this idea out there before, his pro-rel idea is guest spots in Major League Soccer, starting with 2 guest spots, so that you don't have to relegate MLS teams to begin with. You can just have 2 guest teams from the lower divisions who win the right to go and play in MLS for at least a season. I love that idea. 1, because it could easily be done. You wouldn't have to rearrange things. And 2, because I think it would be the beginning of something. It would be the door to pro-rel just becoming slightly ajar. And it's not even a whole foot. Maybe it's like a little toe in there, but it's slightly open and it's on the way.
Yes.
Yeah. I
really
love that as a starting point.
I thought that was a brilliant idea. We talked about it on the show on Monday when I interviewed Michael Winograd. I really like that. I like that maybe if you combine that with aspects of Kyle Martino's promotion relegation plan, because he has some actual specific ideas for dates at which you start incorporating NASL and USL.
The 2030 project, it's called. Yeah.
Then it applies to Major League Soccer after 2030. And then and then maybe at a certain point you open it up to even lower divisions, maybe amateur divisions. And
which would appeal to the Adult Soccer Association, possibly.
Yeah.
Right?
But incorporated within that is how you increase TV revenue and market share and marketing aspects of those individual leagues so that you still have more money coming in. And I think if you combine those two, you do have a somewhat workable plan going forward.
And then I've got also the short-term version from Michael Winograd, the long-term version from Kyle Martino, but the passion for pro-rel of Eric Ronaldo.
Okay.
So he's the one who really is. He has a general commitment to not having US soccer and Major League Soccer sitting in a tree, KISSING. You know what I'm saying? So he really is. Even if he doesn't win this election, he has been driving that message. He has made it part of the sort of the general conversation. So I would have Ronaldo's passion with Winograd's short-term plan and Kyle Martino's long-term plan.
All right. I'm with you on that. Because, you do have to have an element of the salesmanship there. And I think Ronaldo definitely has that. I think Winograd does to a certain extent. So too does Martino. So you combine all three.
But you could say Winograd's plan is maybe a little more timid. But I think timid is the way to get it started, right? Without busting things open, without ending up in court immediately, all that good stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if we're going to continue with the hybrid approach, I want to talk about equality and diversity. And I think I really like some of the things that Hope Solo had to say about equality at all levels. In her, not lawsuit, but her complaint she's filed with the Olympic Committee, which I guess is who oversees U.S. soccer.
So the U.S. soccer is violating the Stevens Act by essentially favouring MLS instead of just growing soccer in general. That's my very short précis of it.
Yeah, and she basically has a footnote.
That was a tautology.
I am sort of paraphrasing here. I liked it. I'm sort of paraphrasing, but she definitely uses the line of if Kathy Carter claims to have been battling on the front lines, then complainant, which is Hope Solo, hasn't seen her there or something like that. Because it's this idea that a lot of people are talking about the importance of equality and equal pay and equal treatment for the women's teams as well as the Paralympic teams and the beach soccer teams. But maybe people are only talking about it because it's a popular point nowadays, whereas Hope Solo, I think, argues that she's been advocating for this for a very long time. But I would blend that a little bit with Michael Winograd again in a thing that I felt like he stressed in the show that I haven't seen from a lot of other people.
When you interviewed him?
Is equality in the form that each team wants it. And I think the point there is that when you look at the women's national team, they don't have, say, the lucrative salaries from the individual clubs that, say, the men's team or men's players do. And so then...
But they do have the salary from US Soccer to subsidize their NWSL career,
And so there's this idea that, while equal pay for the two teams seems like a really good idea, there is this idea that maybe the women's team wants to hold on to marketing rights because you could argue they're a more marketable team in a lot of ways. Or maybe they want to hold on to different aspects that maybe the men's team don't care as much about. And so maybe...
I think equal treatment is more important than equal pay. And it should result in basically the same thing.
Yeah, and so I appreciate that sort of
I'm going to remove the word basically from that. It should result in the same thing.
Yeah, it should. But I feel like if you look at a lot of the candidates, what you'll see them go to is if the men are flying first class, the women are flying first class. Winograd said that. I've heard Martino say that. I've heard Winalda say that.
I'm fully on board with that. That would be in all my Frankenstein's monsters.
I am too, but I think that is the easy way to address this issue, to say if the men are playing on grass, the women are playing on grass. Like again, that's an easy way to score points, but when you're looking at...
But it's a good commitment to have in the future.
I don't disagree with that, but I think it's the easy commitment to have versus an actual approach to how do we make it so that the teams are being paid in an equal way that they want. Same thing for Paralympic teams, same thing for beach teams, whatever other teams are out there. That you find a way to make them feel incorporated and included and make them feel satisfied with that level of inclusion.
Okay, so I've got to be honest, I don't have too much in my creature from Hope Solo or Steve Gans. Because I think a lot of the stuff from both candidates is a little vaguer than I would like. But the specifics I did like are on the topic of equality. Steve Gans says, basically, I think this is a quote from his website, the women's national team will thereafter play on artificial turf only as rarely as does the men's national team.
Yeah, I saw that one.
And will in all other ways enjoy equal working conditions. So again, that's the same as Winograd's in many ways, right? Like if Winograd says, if there's this bit of technology for the men's national team, then we make sure the women's national team also has access to that same technology. The one part from Hope Solo, I liked her line that there's a commitment to become the global leader in equality and women's issues. That's what US soccer should be aiming for. But I also like her idea to push to include women at all levels of the USSF executive and organizational hierarchy. Basically, hire and appoint more women. That sounds obvious, but I don't think it's anything else that anyone is committed to.
I mean,
I may be wrong. I could easily be proved wrong on that.
No, I think everybody's probably paid lip service to it. Probably Kathy Carter more than a lot of the other candidates. But again, I think that's where Hope Solo has tried to point out that Kathy Carter may say that she's all about equality and equal treatment throughout U.S. soccer, but that's a thing she could have advocated for in the past and hasn't, but now she is.
Well, here's the thing about Kathy Carter as well. If she was elected, she would be the first female president of the United States Soccer Federation. That would be a landmark moment just in that way. And to Hope Solo's point as well about appointing and hiring more women, this is kind of political, but I genuinely believe that society is better off with more women in positions of power. I would like to see US soccer do that, not just for the optics, but because I think it will make US soccer a better organization.
I agree with that. I think the only caveat I would say is that I don't have that same level of, like, if Kathy Carter wins. Basically, I do, frankly, have some issues with Kathy Carter's campaign, the way she's run this campaign. And I don't like the idea of being like, but she's a woman, so at least there's that.
Right. Neither of us are saying that.
That feels like you're paying lip service at that point. And that's where I'm a little bit more like, I get what you're saying, but I'm not sure I fully agree. That said, throughout the rest of U.S. soccer, I think there could be much more diversity and equality.
Here's the other thing I like about Steve Gans, if we were talking about diversity and equality. I believe Steve Gans is the only candidate that put a Spanish language version of his manifesto on his website.
That resonated with me. I'm not going to lie.
I think I may have that wrong. Like Martino or Winalda may also have done that, but I definitely saw it. Click here for the Espanol version.
If nothing else, I don't think
the whole phrase was in Espanol, by the way. It's just I only know the one word.
That's fine. I don't think the other two did, and at least they didn't put it as prominently, where it is very much like the center thing you see when you go to Steve Gans' website.
Yes.
It's like, Steve Gans, here's my platform, and Espanol.
Can we talk about Carl Martino?
Sure.
He has a whole section in his Everyone's Game. Martino's commitment to Latino players is hire a chief diversity officer, retain a marketing firm specializing in Latino customers. That is obvious and brilliant, right? I mean, it obviously costs money, but I think it's a wonderful idea because it shows a real commitment. 10% of the annual budget would go toward Latino initiatives focused on coaching education, insurance for adult leagues and field construction. And this one you will like. Create a USSL social media, US Soccer Latino handles that provide information and other communications in Spanish. This is similar to your complaint about US Soccer not having enough Spanish content, just really front and center. Here we are in Spanish.
Here is my only, I'm not trying to be contrarian here.
My monster would be bilingual.
That's fine. That's good. That's what I thought. Pero, the only thing I'm not a huge fan of is, honestly, if Carlos Cordero told me I'm going to advocate or allocate 10% of the budget, I would be like, okay, he knows that that's a possibility. My only hesitation is I've heard Cal Martino say 10% there. I think he wants to give 25% of the budget to I forget what the organization is called that promotes soccer development around the country for
the US Soccer Foundation.
Yes, I think that's it.
Oh, the It's Everyone's Game initiative, which is under the US Soccer Federation. I mean, he even kind of named his manifesto after it, right? He's called his website Everyone's Game USA. kind of named after the It's Everyone's Game initiative. Yeah.
But suddenly that's 35% of the budget. That, like, my only hesitation is that he says that, and then he gets in there and they're like, oh, no. Like 75% of the budget is already earmarked for all this stuff. You cannot change that.
Yeah, I can see that.
So, but he may well have already done that research, but that's my only hesitation there.
And maybe the 10% is negotiable, but I just really like the idea of having a dedicated, essentially everything I just listed is something that is dedicated to Latino players, right? And whether it's 1% or 10% or whatever, it's something that's carved out and this is specifically for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the sweet spot for me is where people aren't just acknowledging this is a problem. So, like, some of the platforms are like, we must do more to increase diversity. Like, that's a whole lot of nothing.
Address the issues of pay to play. That's literally in Hope Solo's platform.
Yeah, that means nothing to me. By the same token, if you have, like, we'll solve all issues relating to pay to play by 2020 by taking 5% of, like, income and like, that isn't real. You're not going to solve pay to play by doing 5% of anything.
Yeah.
So I like when candidates find that sweet spot.
Yes.
And I think Kyle Martino did that. One of the initiatives he talks about was the over-under initiative that he's doing with Mia Hamm.
I forgot about that. It's not on my list. But
yeah, where it's basically they're trying to build courts that can be used as basketball or futsal or I guess indoor soccer, whatever you want to go there. But I like that because it feels like an achievable initiative with big names that can help promote and raise funds for it, so then you can start getting more fields around the country. I know lots of people have pointed to the idea of building fields to help increase the number of players playing the game, but just that sort of a specific plan that isn't too reliant on numbers or budgets or statistics, it makes me believe it's an actually actionable item.
Actually actionable. That would have been the name of my manifesto.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
And I would like that, but it's mine.
The alliterative, actually actionable manifesto.
To paraphrase
approach.
To paraphrase Councilman Jeremy Jam, I like that. It's mine now.
Shall we talk youth soccer?
We shall. However, I think first we should get some insight into what our listeners out there or people on Twitter want to see themselves.
Some of our listeners are also on Twitter.
That's true.
It turns out. Today's show is sponsored by Roughneck Scarves, makers of scarves for the US Soccer Federation, Major League Soccer, USL, NCAA, plus lots of other team scarves. You can also make custom scarves to promote your team or organization. We like to put our listeners' creative skills to the test.
Sure do.
We asked the question on Twitter today, if you were to design a custom Roughneck scarf to represent Saturday's US Soccer presidential election, what would it look like? We picked out 5 responses. Get us going, Taylor.
I will. Brian says, it would simply say, may our future be better than the sum of our current parts, some spelled S-U-M. All caps.
Some good wordplay. That's some good wordplay.
That's outstanding work.
Steak Sandwich says one side of the scarf would have work in progress laid above red, white and blue stripes. That's fair. The other side would have Kylo Ren with an eagle on his shoulder with the words, let the past die. Very, very mild spoiler alert for The Last Jedi.
I do feel like Kylo Ren could use a pet. That might mellow him out a little bit. So I like the idea of an eagle pet. Good stuff there, Steak. Sunny SoCal Rob 25, hi Rob, says, one U.S. national team fan saying to the other fan, with this election over, we can now focus on the real issue. Wenger in or Wenger out?
I feel like most people have already made their mind up on that.
Yeah.
On that particular
But I like the idea
issue.
that, like, you could scratch one out and, like, circle the other one so that you've made your feelings known via scarf.
You could just fold the scarf a little bit.
Yeah, perfect. It's the way, like, you know how you can fold it one way or the other on a scarf?
Yeah.
You just have out or in pointing. There you go.
Yeah. Roughneck scarves, you should actually do that.
That actually should be a thing.
That would sell well.
You can just flip it depending on if Arsenal are winning.
Yeah. Mid-game. You can do it mid-game. STJ says...
that is genuinely a really good idea,
isn't it?
And I think we should pitch that.
Write that down. STJ says, I think this would actually be 9 scarves, but 2 of them would be loosely sewn together. I see what you're doing there, STJ. I see what you're doing there.
Took me a minute.
Yeah.
There's only 8. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. Now I'm with you. Kenton Staler. I'd basically copy the Captain America Civil War poster. Kathy Carter would be in Tony Stark's place with Eric Winalda in caps on the back. All in for 2022.
I assume in caps means in Captain America's place.
Yes.
Yeah. What's going on in that poster? I can't remember. I know they're sort of going against each other.
I'm assuming they're on opposite sides facing each other.
Yeah, and I feel like there's like some cartoony like clash happening between them.
But as I recall, in the actual like Civil War story arc in the comic books, it's like Iron Man represents like the government and like status quo. Captain America represents like you can't tell me what to do, freedom, all that stuff.
That is in the movie, right? Because
Yeah.
Tony Stark is aligned with the government with S.H.I.E.L.D., I want to say. I'm treading into dangerous waters here.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Okay. Thank you to everybody who responded to us on Twitter today. If you would like to go to roughneckscarves.com, you can create your own custom scarf. We don't have a discount code for that because the profit margins are already very, very favorable. They can't be any more favorable. But you can shop the whole selection at roughneckscarves.com. You see a scarf you like, use the discount code Total Soccer Show for 20% off. That's roughneckscarves.com. Link will be in the show notes. But honestly, if you've been listening for a while, you know the URL already.
You sure do. So, youth soccer, you said.
I believe I mentioned youth soccer.
You did. So I will go to Steve Gans.
That's where I was going to go. All right, you go first.
Because he, amongst many different points he had, one of which was reform the development academy via like a youth soccer committee. And I like that idea. I like the idea of not saying, this is what's wrong with it. I've figured it out. I like the idea of having lots of different voices chime in. I know lots of candidates have already done this, have gone out and met with different organizations, groups, academies, whatever.
Listening tour. Listening tour was, I think, the word of the day at the presidential forum.
Yes, and I think Steve Gans has as well. But I like the idea of forming a committee that can come up with specific goals for how you make it so that everyone is incorporated.
Yeah, that seems fair. So the reason what I had is I would take Steve Gans' gentle reform of the Development Academy. He hasn't said burn it all down, right? He's just said a top-to-bottom review of the program, and then in order to assess what's working and what isn't, keep the things that are working, get rid of the things that aren't. He also said he would look into a liberalization of the high school participation restrictions. Obviously, a lot of, if you don't know this, half of our listeners will know this, half won't. One of the things with the Development Academy, if you go to a Development Academy team, you cannot play for your high school. I believe it was Steve Gans' son who sort of fell out of love with soccer and eventually left Development Academy so he could go play high school and enjoy it, right? And play for his high school with his friends, in front of his friends. But the idea of liberalising it, which doesn't mean we'll 100% go back to the way it was, but it doesn't mean we'll 100% stay the way it is. It just means maybe we'll make some little exceptions.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I like that idea.
I do too. And then I like his willingness to also explore other avenues such as ODP. I think that's good, and that's an area that maybe was initially very much relied upon and then has fallen by the wayside. Hope Solo has thoughts on ODP as well, as do many of the other candidates. So but I like Steve Gans' approach to overall analysis of youth soccer in the States.
There we go. We've talked about Steve Gans more than I expected, actually. There's the higher percentage of Steve Gans in our Frankenstein's Monster than expected.
I'm not done yet either.
What? Oh, okay.
I've got more Steve Gans.
While you were talking ODP, I went back to a thing Paul Caligiuri said, part of his platform at the presidential forum. He mentioned making high school coaches, who are also high school teachers, also ODP scouts, right? So again, if you don't know what ODP is, the Olympic Development Program. It's a path to get noticed and play at a high level, really without going through the Development Academy. It's kind of a separate path to the top in many ways. I would argue US soccer doesn't value it as much as it used to. A lot of the forum was about, we're going to make it more noticed, more valuable. Caligiuri's idea is high school coaches would sort of report what they see up to US soccer, up to the Olympic Development Program. So they essentially become scouts for ODP. It got some pushback, right?
Yeah, quite a bit.
Because it's extra work.
Yeah, I mean, it's extra work. Even if you want to take on that level of responsibility, it's going to require more training, probably some sort of coaching certificate. You're going to have to then have an organizational structure in place to have people to report to. Because I guess the idea would be, if you're a high school coach, you've got this one kid who maybe you feel like hasn't gotten playing time at club level or elite club level. You call the person above you and tell them, hey, I've got this kid. Maybe they come out, maybe they report it further up the chain. But it requires a lot of oversight and administration to make it happen.
But I still think, even with flaws, it's an example of a candidate thinking creatively about how to address a problem. Suddenly you've got a lot more ODP scouts than you did, as long as you can find a way to persuade those teachers. Maybe it's just a little extra money to those teachers. It might make it worth their while. He also talked about extending opportunities to high school players with an emphasis on unregistered US soccer talent. Essentially meaning kids who have just got nothing to do with US soccer or US soccer related organizations, finding a way to bring them in so that they get identified. There weren't many specifics about that, but I like the idea. And finally, this is all part of Caligiuri's Talent ID platform, and it's a very nice website. It's got a lot of moving parts to it in a good way. He would build a standardized build a standardized guidance process to identify talent, which I assume is what he would be giving to those high school coaches. This is what we're looking for.
And I like Caligiuri from that standpoint, that it seems like he has a sort of I forget what the term is, but a comprehensive approach to this, that it's essentially that you could maybe train the high school coaches. You could have like additional training sessions where they get certification from other ODP trainers and coaches. Maybe you pay them for that time. You pay them a little bit extra, as you said, but then it becomes more about talent development and the ways that these ODP instructors want you to evaluate talent. So suddenly, like, you're getting this kind of wholesale approach to youth development and talent identification.
And I think that a lot of the pushback was, oh, is he going to do my lesson plans for me to free up some time? And I understand that, and it won't be for everyone. But I'll bet you there's some coaches out there, some high school soccer coaches who are high school teachers, who would love to do that. I'm going to bet our friend Albert, who may be listening right now, he teaches high school, coaches high school. I wouldn't be surprised if he would like the opportunity to recommend some players to an ODP program.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think
if you listen, Albert, don't text us if you're going to contradict what I just said.
I don't think you will. And my hesitation there wasn't about that. It was about my own high school experience, where I did have whoever wanted that extra little bit of money ended up being the coach. And so we ended up my sophomore year having the football coaches who, that's why our whole team was like number 55 and 56. But it was a lot of, okay, we're going to run a mile today, and then we're going to take shots on goal. And it wasn't
a lot of linebackers on your team?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, there you go. But it wasn't a lot of actual instruction about how to play soccer. And I do wonder if you had a little bit more money, but the requirement of, look, some Saturdays you're going to have to show up to get certification and to learn new ways of coaching, even if it means those football coaches still want the job, they then have to actually learn how to coach soccer.
Do it right.
As opposed to let's all run and then shoot on goal.
Yep. So numbers under 55 would be
that's the lesson number 1. Here's what number 9 is. Here's what number 11 is.
It's in the basic course.
Yep.
Can we talk US Open Cup?
Sure.
2 candidates that I saw had interesting approaches to the US Open Cup.
And one of them for me is Kathy Carter.
Okay, you want to go there first?
Sure. I liked her idea of shifting the US Open Cup schedule so that you have the round of 16, quarterfinals, semifinals, and the final all within 4 weeks of each other. It's basically, I think it would be every Wednesday night you have one of those leading up to the final.
So you make the US Open Cup like late stage knockout round an event, right? That is on the calendar all the time. We know what's happening.
And with that...
Block it out, teams. This is happening.
Yep.
Block out your evenings. Watch it on TV.
And then you have increased marketing support to attract interest and establish narratives. And I think that's really important.
Although she kind of could have done that over the past few years with SUM.
Well, there is
right?
that. Again, that's always the kind of caveat. But you could have basically, it allows more interest right away, so then you don't have like, wait, is that this week or is that next? It's a month from now, I think. I'm not sure.
Yes,
we'll get to it, and then suddenly it's like the night of.
I feel that way about the US Open Cup. And actually, I'll back up and say what I just said about Kathy Carter having the opportunity to do that while she's with some. What she's doing here is if she moves that schedule in the way we just talked about, she's putting it in a position where she feels it can be monetized better.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So she didn't have the power to do that at some. She would have if she was US Soccer president. Fair?
Speaking of monetizing on a large scale when it comes to the US Open Cup, I'm assuming that would be the other candidate that you talk about?
Yeah, it really got my attention was Eric Ronaldo's idea to monetize the US Open Cup.
Okay.
We talked about this on the show. It was kind of unrealistic, his grand vision for it. Like he wanted to see it sort of almost as a parallel to the FA Cup, where it's got all this tradition and therefore it's worth a fortune in terms of TV rights. We're clearly not at that point, or we would be getting that money right now, right? Yeah. Or something closer to that money. But I like the idea. I like the concept of it's kind of how I like Eric Ronaldo's Pro Rel concept, right? But I like the idea and the passion for it. If someone at US Soccer had that passion for the US Open Cup, that would it would move some obstacles. It would move the process forward.
Yeah, fair? And he was the one who like really talked about the idea of incentivizing it with money, having it be a more lucrative competition, having more advertising, all that good stuff. And I do like the idea of having more money in it at a very like specific level, where almost in the idea of like, say you make it to the round of 16, well, that's a certain amount of prize money and you get half of that right as soon as you qualify. Because I think about teams like Christos FC who had to do
big run this year,
crowdfunding and really trying to find ways to scrape together the money to be able to travel to Chicago to play this game. And then they were still,
which they won.
They finally got paid, but I think that was only like a month ago or thereabouts for that run that they had in late summer. So if you could like incentivize it by saying, if you qualify for the semifinals, you get the money to travel like as soon as you qualify. It makes it that much more of a reasonable prospect for lower level teams to keep going.
I'm kind of 50-50 on, I didn't know whether to include it, but I want to offer it up to maybe be included in what we're building. Kathy Carter's idea to modify the ownership of the US Open Cup. Right now it is 100% owned by US Soccer. One of her suggestions is to make it be owned by US Soccer, by the US Adult Soccer Association, or the Amateur Soccer Association, which is what Christos FC were part of, and then also co-owned by the various professional leagues. So it would be co-owned by MLS, USL, and the NASL, and possibly like the NPSL as well, and UPSL. I quite like the idea of everybody having ownership of it makes everybody bite into it a little more. Because right now, for example, MLS teams, they do really look at it, especially until they get to the final, as, oh yeah, we got that thing. We'll send some reservish teams out and maybe it'll work out. Like, I think maybe having ownership of it might invest them in it deeper.
To paraphrase Oscar from The Office, where would the Catholic Church be without the popes? No, they just have the one, Daryl. And that's my issue there, is just that I think you're going to get a lot of, no, we want it to be branded this way. No, we want to approach it this way. Well, this schedule doesn't work for us. And you're going to get a lot of self-interest as opposed to, this is how we grow this competition for the good of all.
So this would be a Frankenstein's monster where the left foot is trying to go left and the right foot is trying to go right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. That's what I would say. But it's your Frankenstein's monster, Voltron,
yeah. Well, that's why I just
I
just floated it up there. Yeah.
All right. Another one that I saw a lot of different candidates talk about, but one candidate who spelled it out specifically, was the idea of the establishment of a GM similar to an athletic director. Carlos Cordero was the one who I heard talk about it on the Planet Football Sports Illustrated podcast. He also wrote it out in his interview with Jeff Carlisle of ESPN. But it was this idea that you have basically athletic directors for both the men's and women's side, the GMs. Then you have like sub-positions under there spreading all the way down. So you have sort of a more unified approach and a direct approach to how you're developing the game on both sides, the decisions that are being made, so that it's not all reliant on the actual U.S. soccer president.
Is there any candidate that's against the GM idea?
I don't think so. I think it's a pretty popular idea.
Yeah. I think it's fair to credit Cordero with it, though, because it's a thing that U.S. soccer has basically said we're going to do, right? This might be voted on, it might be at the AGM. They may decide to create the general manager role or roles. I'm guessing it should be roles. And obviously Cordero, as U.S. soccer vice president, he would have been involved in that. So I think it's fair to give him some credit for it.
All right.
I've got one thing that Cordero is the only candidate I've heard suggest, and it's an idea I really, really like.
Does it involve subsidies?
It does. Yep. This is in the aforementioned, it was a Grant Wall interview, right, on the Sports Illustrated podcast. I'd never seen it before, so I may have just missed it, but Cordero talked about the cost of coaching licenses, which everyone says is a problem, right? It's like $4,000 to get one of your licenses here, where it's like 600 euros in Germany. That's because in Germany it's subsidized. At US soccer, it's not. His idea was, rather than dropping the fees, which all of a sudden US soccer is missing loads of income, you still want to increase the number of coaches, and the way to do it is, he called it an ROTC-style program, right?
Yeah.
So I had to kind of look up exactly what that means, because I wasn't fully familiar. This is essentially where the US military will pay for you to go to college, but then you owe them service in return.
Yeah,
approximately,
I think to some extent, yeah. I'm not sure if they do like full scholarship the whole way, but yes, at least partially covered, yes.
So Cordero's idea is that US soccer would subsidize your coaching license, meaning you just wouldn't pay as much for it as the big numbers that you have to pay right now. But in return, you would owe some service to US soccer. So you would then be sort of sent to places, maybe locally or maybe far away, I don't know, he wasn't specific, to go do some coaching where US soccer needs the coaching done.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's a perfect idea, but it is definitely an idea to swell the ranks of coaches who otherwise could not afford to be US soccer licensed coaches.
Yeah, and I would say that, like, from my perspective, when I got my licenses, it's because I was coaching with a club that I played in growing up. They said, yeah, we'll subsidize or we'll pay for you to go out and get this license because we want licensed coaches. But for some people who just want to get a license, who want to get involved in coaching, they might not have a club they've played for, or they might have moved to a new city where they don't have as many connections, and they don't have that opportunity. But if you're moving to a new city and you have US Soccer saying, look, if you want to get a coaching license, we'll pay for it, then we'll hook you up with a club in that area that's underserved or needs another coach. Or even if you're just doing coaching consultation or you're running independent coaching sessions for whomever wants to show up, all of that is a very good idea for getting more people involved.
And I can even see this snowballing into US Soccer creating, say, programs to go into like underserved neighborhoods, and you send those coaches there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So this could really spread out into all kinds of programs. So whoever wins, I really hope someone looks at that Carlos Cordero idea, because I really like it.
Alrighty.
While we're on Carlos Cordero, the other thing I really liked about him was his more realistic approach to the $150 million surplus.
Yeah.
A lot of other candidates have been spending that many times over. Or
it does feel that way.
Some people have said, I'll like create scholarships that will cover pay-to-play fees. Carlos Cordero was very specific about this money's going to be gone really soon. It's going to be eaten up by our operating costs. It's not some giant slush fund. I think basically he has a better grasp of the size of US Soccer's commitments and how far that $150 million will go. Yeah.
And I still, my hesitation with a lot of the plans for that 150, 130, 120, whatever $1 million is remaining is
Canadian dollars, we've established.
Building is a complicated process. You got to get permits. You got to get. I mean, ask David Beckham how hard it is to find land to build a stadium. We're not talking about a stadium, obviously.
It just takes a decade or so.
But I mean, we know people in Richmond who are looking for land to build fields potentially.
Yes.
It's a really difficult process because land is expensive. It's difficult to get the zoning right. Maybe other people are going to compete with you for that land. It's a hard process, and it just feels like some people.
Not everybody is invested in spreading soccer.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Some people want to build, big, expensive condominiums or something instead.
So I'm with you on the idea that I like that he has a more realistic approach. I will say that it feels a little bit at the presidential forum like he overstated. Like he implied that half of that or 100 million of that was already gone because it was earmarked for other projects. The implication he made was that was like in the next year it was going to be gone.
Yeah.
I heard him again on that Grant Wall podcast saying, well, by 2022.
I
and
see.
it's like, well, that's a slightly different.
Yeah, it's a longer timeline.
Slightly different thing.
What about this? I like from Cordero, I think Kathy Carter also said this, the idea of bidding for more tournaments. Mm-hmm. So we're very focused on the 2026 World Cup right now. And I think rightly because, as Cordero said, that would bring in a lot of money, right? Hosting a World Cup brings in money, same as hosting the Copa America brought in a lot of money. Cordero and Carter have both suggested we should put in a serious bid for the 2027 Women's World Cup. Mm-hmm. Not least because imagine, they didn't say this, but I'm imagining this, the glory of back-to-back World Cup tournaments in your country.
That would be pretty fun.
That would be great, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of like the Brazil hosting the World Cup and then the Olympics the next year. You just get these two great sporting events coming to your town.
I like this plan.
Yeah.
I like that. I'm good with that. Now, I will say, in order to do that, you have to interact with FIFA on a pretty consistent basis, which is something the president has to do anyway. And I did like Steve Gans's very deliberate point of he's a 100% reformer who will always prioritize representing the United States when it comes to FIFA.
That's interesting.
And I do think, cough, cough, Chuck Blazer, that it can be very easy to get sucked into the FIFA, black hole of, well, you got to pay here, you got to talk to these people, this has to happen in order for this. And I do feel like maybe that's part of the reason why U.S. Soccer doesn't go after more tournaments is because there's an awareness of what that entails.
That's true.
And the kind of dark underbelly. And so I like a candidate who at least is openly saying, I'm not going to deal with that stuff, whether or not that actually...
Then that means he probably won't get tournaments, is the thing.
Well, there is that.
Because I saw a thing from Kathy Carter, which had never occurred to me, about bidding for youth tournaments.
Yep.
I think this may just appeal to my nerdy instincts, but, think how into the U17 team we were this year. Think how into the U20 team we were this year. Those tournaments, I don't remember the last time it was in the United States. I would love to see those tournaments in the United States, right?
I'm good with that.
It would get more attention if you're watching Andrew Carlton do that stuff on home soil. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. And at least it builds up more excitement about the players coming through the ranks. Mm-hmm. It gives you more enthusiasm for the teams to come.
Yep, there we go. What else you got, Taylor?
That's about it for me in my Voltron.
Okay, so I want to move on to talk semi-specifically about Kathy Carter. Because as we mentioned, we're going to talk later about sort of people's chances of winning. One thing I would say is for all the negativity about Kathy Carter and her role at Soccer United marketing and how she seems to be Don Garber and Sunil Gulati's preferred candidate, I took a good look at her manifesto. I've mentioned a couple of things. She actually has some good specific ideas, and I think she just hasn't done a very good job of communicating them. In the interviews, in the presidential forum, she talked in vagaries. On her website, there are some really specific things.
Okay.
And I would like to incorporate some of those into my monster.
Here is my concern, is that if there are plans on your website that you're not talking about in public, are they actually your plans, or are they things that you've put out because they sound good and they're good PR?
So if I was building my Frankenstein's monster, I would not have Kathy Carter be in the presentational part.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I don't think she has the stagecraft of, say, Eric Winalda. You know what I mean? She did. I mean, I remember seeing at the forum, she looked more like someone who was doing an impression of someone being confident, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Being an impression of a confident public speaker. But she's got a lot of good stuff, even good phrases about not building US soccer on the back of the grassroots organizations. Instead of taking money from the smaller organizations, it's all about sort of, with the US Open Cup as an example, maximizing the monetization of things like the US Open Cup. She also has a lot of stuff about governance. I think that's the interesting thing. She's the one that's talked at length about governance. Things like open and competitive bid processes, meaning no more easy bids for people. Everything is wide open so you can see who's putting the bids in, right? I mean, as a Soccer United marketing person, that's her area of expertise.
It is. Is that not a little bit rich, given some of the accusations that have come down about Soccer United marketing and U.S. soccer?
It is, but some of what I think is that she's not fully in charge of US soccer. She's not in charge of US soccer there, right? She's in charge of Soccer United marketing. You know what I'm saying? You seem very cynical on this.
I think this is why she hasn't brought it up, is because she knows it's an easy area that she's going to get hit on. Is that if you bring up, we want transparency about the bidding process, and we want more people to understand who gets the rights and how, that immediately is, you didn't want that before. That hasn't been the case in the past.
That's fair.
So I think that is sort of the problematic issue of her campaign, is that you can't go too far in one direction because you'll get hit from the other side.
Fair enough. Okay, let's think of it this way. I think other candidates have proposed similar things just about open bidding process. Maybe we'll just put that in, but we'll have it co-owned by multiple other people for whom it is less problematic.
Fair enough.
One of the things she talked about was recruiting commercial partners to support amateur adult leagues, which I think is a really good idea.
Okay.
If a local league has trouble getting sponsorship because you just don't have people with the expertise and the connections, US Soccer may not have the connections but can come down from above and sort of say, hey, Target, do you fancy sponsoring this Minnesota Adult League? Do you know what I'm saying? They can make those connections. You could fund soccer at a lower level by taking the big organization connections and letting them spread down to the smaller people. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm good with more sponsorships, meaning more money at the local level. That seems like a good idea. And
the final couple of things I saw were Kathy Carter had ideas about streaming board meetings, so that they're sort of available to watch all the time, which isn't a thing that happens now. And also making meetings, agendas, and minutes always publicly available after they happen.
See, and this is where I kind of avoided that stuff, because then I've heard people say, like, Sunil Gulati, didn't he say that is already a thing? That you already have the transcripts readily available? People just don't know that?
Not of everything, I don't think.
And so it goes back and forth, and that's where I think I applaud you, but I tried to stay away from that stuff because I wasn't entirely sure what actually already exists.
So here's my understanding. I may be wrong. I'm happy to admit I'm wrong if I'm wrong. The AGM, which is what's happening on Saturday, those minutes are always eventually available, but not every single board meeting. Not every single board meeting is streamed and minutes. Yeah, I think she's talking about just more and more of the business of US Soccer will be sort of out in the open like that.
Gotcha.
And you may not believe her, but it's at least an idea that I would take if it attached to Kathy Carter or not. Fair?
Yeah, and I would say maybe my final. Do you have any other ones?
No.
Then I would say my final thing with Kathy Carter is, if you're going to go with the prevailing narrative that she is the person that Sunil Gulati favors to be the next president of U.S. Soccer,
that's veering into fact.
I would say so. Then my guess would be that he has probably helped her with some of these, or at least has maybe given her some insight into what he would do if he could do things differently.
That's interesting, yeah.
And so if you are a fan of the status quo, I don't think many people, at least on Twitter, are fans of the status quo, but if you think Sunil Gulati has done a good job, then maybe that also appeals to you from the perspective of, this is the one who's going to carry on what he's done well, but change the stuff that he has not.
Right, yeah, so it's like continuity, but with change.
Or status quo, whatever you want to go with.
Yeah. Before we move on to how the actual election works, I want to look back in time to 1990.
Okay.
Because today's episode is sponsored by Howler Magazine. Howler Magazine have a story in the new issue about the 1990 US Soccer presidential election.
Topical.
You haven't read this, right?
I have not.
I'm going to tell you all about it. It was way more contentious than I realized. I'd never known about this story. It is absolutely fascinating. The story is called Swiss Rolled, and it's written by Tim Froh. Can you guess why it's called Swiss Rolled?
I cannot.
I've turned it into a quiz, I guess. It's because the basis of the story is that essentially FIFA got involved in the US Soccer presidential election in 1990 to help Alan Rothenberg get elected.
That would have been my guess, something involving FIFA.
So here's
or Swiss francs.
I'll give you the very broad outline of what happened. Werner Fricker was the sort of incumbent president. He had overseen the US qualifying for the 1990 World Cup, right? First time in 40 years. Didn't disgrace themselves at the World Cup. They'd also won the bid for the 1994 World Cup. In 1988, they'd won the bid to host the 94 World Cup. So he was, theoretically riding high. But there were problems with organising the World Cup. It wasn't going well. I think a lot of money had been spent on the actual bid, and there wasn't that much money left over. And it was there were rumours that the actual hosting of the World Cup was looking shaky. And so Alan Rothenberg, who had FIFA connections, kind of stepped in to become the candidate of, I'm the business guy, I can start making money for US Soccer.
I see.
So this election became about the sort of amateurish version of US Soccer versus the business version, very business-friendly version of US Soccer. And the business version won with some support from FIFA. And that was Alan Rothenberg.
Have you just given away the entire story again?
Yes, but there's way more details about how it all plays out, if that makes sense.
You're all about building drama.
There are multiple characters in the story and ways it happened. Major Indoor Soccer League is heavily involved in the vote, which is fascinating. But so But so what I find fascinating is that this is the sort of the beginnings of the fault line that we still see today, right? Which is between business interests and sort of more soccer-focused interests.
Yeah.
So if you want to read the story, it is in the current issue of Howler magazine. You can go to fifa.wtf/gethowler to get a subscription and use discount code TSS14, that's TSS14, to get 20% off your subscription to Howler magazine.
Thank you to Howler magazine and George for sponsoring today's program.
We'll be hearing from George on Saturday's show. He'll be in Orlando for the US soccer election, and he'll be reporting to us, hopefully.
He sure will.
Yeah.
He sure will. All right, so should we get to the actual election, how it kind of breaks down?
Yes.
We've covered this before, but maybe it's a good refresher to go over like the voting blocks and the percentages and all that. So go ahead and tell us every single person that's going to be voting, if you don't mind, Daryl.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the basics. It's in Orlando. It's the US Soccer Annual General...
I wish you just ended there. It's in Orlando, and we're done.
It's the US Soccer Annual General Meeting, which happens every year. Part of that is the National Council Meeting, which takes place 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Saturday morning, February 10th. It will be streamed live on ussoccer.com, on US Soccer's YouTube channel, and then the presidential part will be streamed live on US Soccer's Facebook page. You absolutely can watch this live. We're going to be in studio at 8 a.m. We're pretty sure it won't start. The actual election part won't start at 8 a.m. But just to be safe, we're going to meet with some coffees.
Okay,
that
seems like a good idea. We want to be here just in case.
Yeah. So I read Jeff Carlisle's article for ESPN, which
Mm-hmm.
was an excellent explainer for how this all works. So I'm essentially going to give you the highlights of that. I would encourage you to go read it. Not you, Taylor, because I know you've read it. To go read it to get more detail. His estimation is that around 500 actual people will vote, 500 members. But it's not 500 votes all weighted equally, and that's the important part, isn't it, Taylor?
What, all votes, or some votes are more equal than others?
Yeah, that was Jeff's line, right?
Yes.
It's a very good line.
Yeah, because you've got the 4 different voting blocks. You've got the Adult Council, the Youth Council, the Athlete Council, the Professional Council. But you've got like far more votes, individual votes coming out of the Youth Council and the Adult Council, but they're all designed to be equally weighted or roughly equally weighted, so that even though you've got fewer votes on, say, the Athlete Council, that still counts almost the same as the percentage-wise as the Adult or Youth Councils.
I got the numbers for you. Youth Council counts for 25.8% of the vote. Adult Council counts for 25.8% of the vote. Professional Council counts for 25.8% of the vote. Then the Athletes Council counts for 20%. The remaining 2.6%, approximately, is spread pretty thinly among things like the Fan Council, which is US Soccer voted fans, life members, all kinds of other people. Here's the important part to understand it. It's not as if the Youth Council votes as one big block and you get 25.8% of the vote, right? It's approximately 200 various member associations of the Youth Council who each get a vote, essentially. Some of them get like 2 votes, some of them get 3 votes, some of them get 1 vote. So it's 25.8% spread throughout all those people. So that's why we really can't tell exactly. You can't say this candidate has locked up the Youth Council vote because it could be spread amongst multiple people.
And it is. Some youth councils and some state organizations have already endorsed certain candidates. Others have endorsed others. So you won't have that one big block. Where it does seem like you will have a block vote is with the Athlete Council.
Yes.
That 20%. And that's
just historically, right?
Yeah.
Historically, they voted as a block.
And I think the implication from the Carlisle article, from other things I've read, was that in the past they voted as a block because it was always going to be Sunil Gulati, but if he wants to get that percentage vote, he has to have a few concessions for them. So the question is, will they continue to vote as a block? So far, it seems like they will be, because we've seen sources reporting that they had phone calls or meetings with 4 of the candidates. It seems like maybe those are the 4 finalists to get that block vote.
And it's probably not who you would think it is, right? It was Michael Winograd, it was Kyle Martino, it was Carlos Cordero, it was Kathy Carter. Eric Winalda, as reported, was not one of the 4 people that the Athlete Council met with.
Nor was Hope Solo. And I know some people thought that maybe she's a current athlete, so maybe she would get some consideration there as well. No such luck. Now, there is a possibility, a very small possibility, that they've already decided they're going to vote for Winalda, for example, but they want to talk to 4 people just to make sure that's the right vote.
Okay.
But I think far more likely is that one of those 4 you mentioned ends up being the one who gets that full 20%.
Or close to. You might have a couple of stray votes, a couple go rogue. I'm not sure I like the idea of voting as a block. I think each person should maybe vote their conscience, but that's how it's going to go down. That's why the Athlete Council vote is very, very important.
And I think the other reason why they vote historically as a bloc is because their main interest is the collective bargaining process for both of the national teams. That's where their that's their main area of concern, aside from
it possibly shouldn't be, but
greater equality. Yeah, but so then you basically want to make sure that whomever you're in backing has guaranteed that they're going to be favorable or agreeable or amenable to you when the negotiation time comes. Now, the other one that's a little bit more decided, as far as we understand, is the professional bloc.
So what this means, professional council, there are 16 members, but they account for 25.8% of the vote, right? So it's a very small number of votes with a lot of power behind each vote, right? Of the 16 voters, 9 of them are MLS related. 3 are NWSL related, 3 are USL, and just the 1 is NASL. So as we understand it, it seems Kathy Carter, obviously, as the president of some, she has the 9 MLS votes, right? So that's already, I calculated, or did I read? No, I read 14.5% of the total vote is already going to Kathy Carter with the 9 members of MLS.
And the safe assumption would be that the NASL vote is going to Eric Winalda,
yes,
since he has the backing of Silva, so Ricardo Silva. So maybe that's 1.8%, I think, is what we figured out.
It all adds up, but one of those numbers is bigger than the other.
And so you look then at Kathy Carter, basically, that means with the 9 of those 16 votes, that means she has already 14.5% of the overall vote. And that means if you say she makes a really compelling argument to the Athletes Council, suddenly if they vote as a bloc, she's got 34.5. She's getting much closer than a lot of the other candidates to that majority percentage she needs.
Should we get to that? So you need basically more than 50%. Once someone has a majority, they are the winner. They are the US soccer president as soon as the meeting ends. It's immediate, right? There's no transition team or anything like that. You are the president.
Yep.
If no one hits 50%, plus 50%, 50 plus percent. I got there. We go to a second round of voting. So people can drop out, I believe. They can say, I'm dropping out. And then you can't digitally vote for them, but you can write their name in. So you could do that, but you'd be crazy to do it.
Right.
At that point, probably what we'll see in the room on the live stream, it might be hard to tell, but you'll probably have people saying, okay, don't vote for me, maybe vote for my second choice. And that's when you'll see maybe coalitions start to emerge.
If it gets that far. Sure.
If it gets that far. There's a chance that Kathy Carter wins this on first vote.
I think there's a good chance. And I don't love that, but I think there's a chance. Now, the thing that might disrupt that is we know Carlos Cordero announced he was going to run before Sunil Gulati announced he would not be standing for re-election, which means that maybe that splits a little bit of that MLS vote. Maybe a couple of those votes go to Carlos Cordero. I'm not saying that's possible.
Yeah, MLS may not vote as a bloc.
But I do think if you look at what Cordero was doing, if you look at some of the points he's been emphasizing, you go back. I think one of the key points in his platform is adult soccer has been ignored for far too long, and it's this huge group of constituents that we aren't doing a good job of incorporating. In that Jeff Carlisle article, he spoke to different members to try to get a feel for which way they were leaning, how important their vote was going to be. The Adult Council, their biggest issue was that they don't feel included, they don't know what the USSF is doing for them, and they want a reduction in fees. All of those are things that Carlos Cordero directly campaigns on.
That's interesting.
Same thing for the Youth Council, where their emphasis is that they feel overburdened by the mandates from U.S. Soccer, and they want it to be less of a hostile atmosphere amongst all of the different youth organizations. He talks a lot about that. So you can sort of see where Carlos Cordero is trying to gather a lot of support. It's from those two big blocks, and then he's still involved in the Athlete Council discussions as well.
So I want to prepare people for this, because I think a lot of people I've seen on Twitter and just in general kind of feel like Eric Winalda is the favourite because he's got so much popular momentum behind him. But when you start looking at how these votes break down and who has what, and the fact that he wasn't invited to present before the Athletes Council, we don't know exactly what that means, but we can guess that it means he's not in consideration for their vote. It actually makes a path to victory very difficult for Eric Winalda.
Semi-conspiratorial, I would say that, he did say we're going to release more position papers as we get closer to the election. It's Wednesday. I think it's Wednesday night at this point. It's too close to release more. And it makes me wonder if he's already maybe seen the writing on the wall and is still campaigning because he doesn't want to give up. Maybe he thinks he can still sway some people, but maybe he thinks, I'll get through that first round, then I'll throw my support to somebody else.
Did you see it? So you saw the Alexi Lalas video. Actually, I haven't seen it. I've just heard tell of it. He's essentially arguing that even though Eric Winalda won't win.
No, he says
also has won.
Says it's basically he's won no matter what, because if he wins, then he wins. But if he doesn't win, then he becomes this sort of voice for the opposition, voice for people who want pro-rel, who want a switch to the European calendar, that he is sort of, I think Alexi Lalas calls him like a folk hero, similar to Bernie Sanders, is what he sees him as becoming.
So I see it more as that even if he doesn't win, he's moved the conversation in a particular direction and maybe made the things happen that he wants to see happen.
Maybe, but I think Lalas meant more so. I don't know. We're interpreting what Lalas said.
Yeah,
I
haven't even seen it, so I apologize. But I think I will listen to the podcast if Alexi's listening. State of the Union is the new Alexi Lalas podcast.
It is, but I think he's basically saying he becomes a figure for that group of the soccer community to rally around.
Okay. One thing we haven't noted is the rumours I've seen on the internet about the involvement of the Wasserman Group.
Yeah.
So it seems everyone knows that the Wasserman Group is the sort of biggest agency that represents a lot of high-profile American soccer stars. Yeah, they are involved in a big chunk of American soccer sponsorship and high-profile players. There are rumours floating around that sort of they've been leveraging their power to encourage people to vote for Kathy Carter.
Yeah.
If that is the case, I have no evidence of that. I have no source that has told me that. I've just read other people reporting it. If that is the case, that's a huge problem. That's a huge, huge problem.
Yeah.
As in a scandal.
All right, explain why you think it's a scandal. I don't disagree, but I've seen plenty of people say, but other candidates are directly endorsed by people who are suing the Federation. How is this then a scandal? If these allegations or rumors are allegedly true. I'm going to throw in more allegedlys than I probably need to.
Cover us. Because it seems the rumor is, and again, I'm being really careful that this is a rumor that I don't have sources on, so this is not fact, that Wasserman have kind of put pressure on athletes saying, well, it might be harder for you to get sponsorships if you don't vote for Kathy Carter. And I don't know if that means if Kathy Carter doesn't win the election, it'll be harder because the business landscape won't be as good, or if it means we're watching you, which would be that's a lot more like the mafia coming in and asking for their protection money and saying, be an awful shame if something happens to this deli.
I mean, yeah. And so you then have this situation in which maybe voting groups vote in a way that we would not have anticipated, because I think it was Andy Doss at the New York Times, his initial reporting coming out of the forum.
He'll love having his name next to our rumor.
No, but I think his initial reporting coming out of the forum is that he thought Kathy Carter would be the leader on the first ballot, but that it would be difficult for her to gain any votes from there.
I see. But then you could see the Martino Winaldo vote maybe combine and overtake her in the second round?
That was the theory then.
Yeah.
But then if you look at maybe these other groups are suddenly being influenced fairly or unfairly, then maybe you have a situation in which she scrapes together enough that she gets that 51-52% on that first vote, and that ends it all right there.
All over,
because I do think to the point he was making, it's that probably as the vote goes on, because you're not going to have, say, on the off chance that Eric Winalda does decide, I'm not going to win this, I'm going to throw my support behind Michael Winograd or whomever, that he's not going to do that in the first round of voting. So you're still going to have all 8 candidates there. And if Carter can get that majority on the first round, that means she wins it, obviously.
Well, everybody's waiting to do the throwing their votes to the people.
Exactly.
She may just sweep in and take it.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but unless you have, and that's been the other thing that's been rumored, I think Kartik Krishnauer was reporting that one, that there are already conversations amongst the opposition outsider candidates. I threw both of those in air quotes, but listeners can't see that they're already discussing that. And there maybe is a possibility that suddenly everybody comes out and votes for one candidate, and then we have a much more contested election.
It's what makes this thing kind of really exciting, because we've heard things and we've seen things, but we don't actually know what's going to go down on Saturday, February 10th in Orlando, and it will all unfold before our eyes on the stream.
There we are.
Yeah, and then we'll have a podcast that night all about it. Do you mind if I have a closing thought on this? Okay, if we assume that the Wasserman rumor is not true, then I would argue that even though there seems to be a lot of anti-Kathy Carter sentiment, she would be an improvement on the current situation of US soccer. So I think it actually wouldn't be the worst thing if it is that she wins this. I think there are other candidates maybe I would prefer, but I don't think we should all sort of give up on US soccer if Kathy Carter is elected.
I don't think we should give up on it either, and we're not going to, obviously, for a number of reasons, including the fact that we do a podcast that focuses primarily on U.S. soccer.
No, but I mean, I won't be just like, the future is now ruined, we're never going to be able to do anything. There's still a chance that the future is much brighter than the recent past.
There's a chance, certainly. I will definitely be less optimistic if Kathy Carter wins. And full disclosure, it's because she hasn't been on the show. And honestly, that's part of it.
Not for lack of trying, right?
Not for lack of trying. And it does make me feel like you look at the candidates who have been on the show, those are the people who I tend to believe when they advocate transparency and openness and honest communication. And two of the favored candidates we've reached out to on multiple occasions, we haven't heard anything. And it does make me wonder if things will change that much. Now, I'm not trying to say then that I'm going to be totally opposed to things, but I'm certainly going to be less optimistic and enthusiastic, at least right away.
That seems fair.
Okay.
On that note, once again, Saturday, February 10th, go to ussoccer.com or US Soccer's YouTube page or US Soccer's Facebook page to watch the election unfold. We'll be back, I'm going to say Saturday evening by the time we get the podcast out. Hopefully we'll get to talk to George, who's down in Orlando, but Taylor and I will be here giving our sort of quick take, hot take, essentially, on what just happened in Orlando.
This is true.
There will be a new US Soccer president next time you hear from us.
There will indeed.
Which also involves the fact that we will be taking Thursday and Friday off.
Yeah.
No new shows Thursday and Friday because we're going to prepare for a big weekend.
We are indeed. Could be a long one. Could be a long one. Could be a short one. We don't know how the vote's going to go. But we shall see come Saturday. But before then, we have some scouting to get to, Daryl Grove.
Ooh, okay.
We've got many new updates from the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network, starting with Luis Mitchell Jr., who is scouting Callum Hudson-Odoi, the 18-year-old Ghanaian English attacker for Chelsea. Callum was an unused substitute in Chelsea's 4-1 loss to Watford. He might have gotten time, but when Bakayoko was sent off, it was always unlikely that Conte would gamble on the youngster, so no minutes for Callum Hudson-Odoi.
So I understand that Callum Hudson-Odoi has Ghanaian and English nationality. But he's an England U17 international, so I would like that noted on future scouting reports.
And it's something that I actually sort of feel uncomfortable doing at times when I refer to somebody as like Mexican or American or English, like when they do have all of these different possible nationalities.
We're talking about national team, right?
Yeah, but essentially that's what it comes down to for me is who you're playing your national team soccer for, at least at time of reporting.
There we go. Up next, Jeff Markman.
Reporting or recording, whichever.
Both. Jeff Markman is scouting Reece Nelson, the 18-year-old English midfielder for Arsenal. Jeff says Nelson's dip in form in late fall is a thing of the past, as he scored a nifty goal in the Young Gunners' 4-0 win over Everton in the Premier League 2. Wow, Gunners beating Everton at all levels recently. The victory takes the Arsenal side to within 1 point of PL2 leaders Liverpool. Title race much more exciting in PL2.
Indeed. Julie Nishimura-Jensen, hi Julie, scouting Alen Halilovic, the 21-year-old Croatian attacker for Las Palmas. Second bottom Las Palmas took on last place Malaga. It's a barn burner on Monday, and Halilovic subbed on as a left-sided attacker in a 4-3-3. Julie was mentally composing a not-so-great report of a not very interesting 0-0 draw when Halilovic scored in the 90th minute.
Alan!
A headed clearance fell to Halilovic at the edge of the box. He had time to chest it down and volley it home for the game winner. The other important news of note is that he now has a ponytail.
This is a joke only English people will get, but back of the net. Someone will laugh at that. Billy Harding is scouting...
Isn't that just where the ball ends up?
I'll explain that.
Okay.
Billy Harding is scouting Callum Slattery, the 18-year-old English central midfielder for Southampton. Billy says he has watched all 1,100 minutes of Callum Slattery in the Premier League 2 this year.
Back of the net. Did I do it right?
You did.
Okay.
And says that he is an attacking number 8 with good, quick, accurate passing who rarely loses possession. But... Southampton have been playing him as a number 6. Slattery appears to be gaining confidence in his new position, but needs to improve 2 things. 1, moving off the ball to make himself available for passes. 2, his industriousness on defence. With Romeo and Højbjerg playing as the first-team holding midfielders, the Saints will likely be marching on without Slattery for another year or 2. The good news is Slattery is only 18. Plenty of time to learn.
Before we get to the next report, I just want to say, for the third time this week, our neighbor next door has gotten a phone call between 6:55 and 7 p.m. And I'm just going to say, person who's calling, whomever you may be, know what office hours are. Come on. All right. Elijah Chappell scouting Joe Willock, 18-year-old English midfielder for Arsenal. Perhaps inspired by the arrivals of Henrikh Mkhitaryan and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Willock notched 3 assists. That's the Mkhitaryan special in the Arsenal U23's 4-0 win over Everton's U23s.
A lot of reports on that game.
The first was lots of Arsenal players in the scouting network. So too Everton players, but maybe they didn't want to talk about this one. The first was slightly lucky, but the second 2 were well-placed through balls. Willock also served as Arsenal's captain for the match.
I thought you were going to say, inspired by the arrivals of Mkhitaryan and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Joe Willock has lengthened his name.
Oh, that too. He's now Joe Willock Joe.
Joe Willock Joe. Scott Friedman is scouting Emre Mor, the 20-year-old Turkish winger for Celta Vigo. This was the kid who was at Dortmund, right? Mm-hmm. Scott says Mor has only...
the tradition continues.
That wasn't even an intentional ironic one. Mor has only played 270 minutes in 13 appearances this season and is stuck behind the front three of Iago Aspas, Pione Sisto and Maxi Gomez at Celta Vigo.
I believe you christened it that last time.
I thought it was gas. Didn't we call it gas?
Oh, that could be too.
There was some speculation about a January loan, but that has obviously not happened because it's February. Meanwhile, Moore has been replaced at Dortmund by Jadon Sancho, and the prevailing feeling amongst fans is that Sancho has similar style and technical ability to Moore, but lacks his temper and occasional selfishness. In a pro-English moment, I'm also going to say he's 3 years younger.
There we go. Elijah Bates scouting Jeremy Toljan, the 23-year-old German left-back for Dortmund. German for now? ?
He is US eligible.
Toljan has won tournaments, not many tournaments, but has won tournaments with the German youth national teams and has become established at club level, but he still is seemingly miles away from the German first team, and it doesn't seem like Jogi Löw rates him all that highly.
Maybe you'll get another 3,000 miles away from the German first team.
As a result, he's gotten increased attention lately due to his seemingly wavering allegiance to Germany. Elijah thinks that there's a chance that Toljan could potentially be one of a flood of young German youth internationals, or German youth internationals would be appropriate, who might be looking to file one-time switches.
Ooh, March is going to be interesting. That's probably too late, right?
Yeah.
To get anyone in for March. Sam Nelson is scouting Ulysses Yanez, the 16-year-old American forward for the LA Galaxy. Sam Nelson says Ulysses has been training with the Galaxy first team this past week, playing 30 minutes in the first team's preseason match. After the game, he hopped on a plane to Florida to join the U18 national team for their upcoming friendlies against Costa Rica. He might have missed a few weeks of high school, but his future on the field looks really bright this season. US Soccer would love this kid to go big, right? Because I think he's a Mexican-American who they could say he stayed with us. He could be the antidote to Jonathan Gonzalez.
Sure, I'll take that. Steve Renard scouting Yuri Tielemans, the 20-year-old Belgian midfielder from Monaco. Steve consulted with his coworker Jason, who Steve says is an infrequent or semi-occasional listener to the show. Jason, get it together. And now feels he may have been too harsh on Yuri in his last report. That said, Yuri still struggled with his defensive spacing and his overall pressing, but was on the field and somewhat contributed to Monaco's 3-2 comeback win over Lyon.
There's a lot of qualifications before that success.
I think it was basically that in the highlights, it cut to him hugging his teammates after they scored the third.
Yeah.
So he was probably on the field doing something.
Hey, hugs are good. Ed Ritter is scouting Ben Mines. We've already got one report recently on Ben Mines. What's he done now? 17-year-old American midfielder for the New York Red Bulls. I thought he was a striker.
He stayed put.
Let's say attacking midfielder. Ben stayed in New York to train with the reserve squad while the first team headed to Tucson to continue to prepare for the Red Bulls CONCACAF Champions League clash against Olympia on February 26. Wow, MLS team's going to be back in action sooner than I thought. Ben will head to Arizona next week where the Red Bulls 2 team will play several friendlies against MLS squads.
Matthew Cleveland scouting Daniel Malin, the 19-year-old Dutch forward for young PSV. Malin got his first minutes with the PSV senior team, so I guess just with PSV, coming on as a sub in their 4-0 win over PEC Zwolle? Something like that. After the game, he said that he was excited to make his debut and that the stadium was different with people in it. Meanwhile,
that's a good line.
He was given the Best Talent Award by his mother. Matthew clarifies that it's a real award from the club, not one created by his mother. She just handed it to him. Good job, Matthew. And good job, Danielle, by the way.
Tom Gaffney is scouting James Sands, the 17-year-old American defensive midfielder and or centre-back for NYCFC. James Sands will have competition for starting time in midfield as NYCFC have brought in Ebenezer Afori, a wonderfully named 22-year-old Ghanaian international from Stuttgart. This means Sands will struggle for minutes, particularly because there's no NYCFC USL team. They do have an affiliation with San Antonio in the USL, but no NYCFC players actually played for the USL side last season. I did not know that.
Maybe that will change this year. We shall see.
Or maybe James Sands will just steal some minutes. Go on, James Sands.
There we go. Mike Wills scouting Julian Brandt, the 21-year-old German attacker for Bayer Leverkusen. More Bayer Leverkusen coming later on. Mm-hmm. Julian scored a pair of goals in Leverkusen's midweek 4-2 victory in the DFB Pokal quarterfinal against Werder Bremen. Julian scored the opener with an easy finish and then equalized in the 55th with a lovely shot from outside the box. In transfer news, Julian's father has publicly stated his intent to stay with Leverkusen next season to help them in European competitions. That's Julian's desire, not the father's.
But both.
Yeah, that works.
John Youngblood is scouting Tashan Oakley-Booth, the 17-year-old English midfielder for Tottenham. John says, a week after making the bench in the FA Cup fourth round at Newport for Tottenham, Tashan Oakley-Booth did not make the bench in the replay at Wembley. He did make the bench in the recent U23 match against a Liverpool U23 side that featured Ings and Lallana. Oh, that was at the famous game. So it looks like he will get more looks for the U23s, which is still impressive because it's a step up for the 17-year-old.
It is indeed. Do you mean famous game because Adam Lallana got angry?
Yes.
Sometimes you got to punch teenagers, I guess, if you're Adam Lallana with a ponytail.
You don't.
You don't. Russell Varner is scouting
You also
Hugo.
don't need a ponytail.
Well, potato, to each his own, something like that. One of those worked.
Just flatten
Russell Varner scouting Hugo Arellano, the 19-year-old American defender for the LA Galaxy. Arellano played 30 minutes in the Galaxy's 3-1 loss to Real Salt Lake in their preseason opener last Saturday, lining up at left back on the team's second unit. Russell hasn't been able to find any decent footage of Hugo from that match, but wanted to pass along word regardless.
Is second unit sort of like you played the middle 30?
Either that or it's their second string.
Second string, okay. Dylan Viech is
maybe
scouting Kai Havertz, 18-year-old German attacking midfielder for Bayer Leverkusen. We saved the best to last. Kai once again started in the number 10 position yesterday, played the full 120 minutes in Leverkusen's DFB Pokal win over Werder Bremen. Kai was a creative force for Leverkusen and netted only his second goal of the season when he sealed the game in the 118th. Go on, Kai, cause that drama. The next round will see them face off against one of Bayern, Eintracht, or Schalke.
That game, I think some of those games were happening today, but I don't know what happened with the overall scores.
Oh, today or possibly yesterday, Aaron Johansson was playing for Werder Bremen again.
Yeah.
Did really well. He got an assist or a goal. I didn't actually see. Everyone was really impressed. And then he got his hip injured again.
Yeah, the same hip that's been injuring him, yeah?
Yeah, painful.
So maybe, hopefully not a prolonged spell. We shall see.
Yeah, but it means the chances of him playing in March for the US like we hoped, it's not so good, right?
Not so good, no.
Nicked so good. All right, thank you to everybody.
On that note.
Everybody who sent scouting reports today, we very much appreciate it. If you'd like to join, TotalSoccerShow.com/join is the place to go.
That's the one.
As we mentioned earlier, we're going to be off Thursday and Friday, so don't be surprised if you don't see any new downloads in your podcast queue. Normally a little
I would say do be surprised if you do see new downloads.
Fair enough. I'm actually taking my day off and I'm going to go to Stanton and see Hamlet.
You and I are doing the most ridiculous things. I'm going to Orange, Virginia to go furniture shopping.
Oh, wow.
And you're going to watch Hamlet.
Are we getting old?
It feels that way.
Yeah,
It feels that
right?
way. Yes.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to go mid-century modern furniture shopping, Daryl. Sometimes you have to.
All right, so I'm going to enjoy that anyway. I'm not going to think about soccer at all while I'm there. I'm going to save myself for the big day on Saturday. Then Sunday we'll be back talking about actual soccer that happens on a pitch because it's the North London derby this weekend. It's Spurs v Arsenal, Saturday morning, 7:30. We'll be reviewing that, hopefully, if there's some action, along with the rest of the weekend's action on our Thumbs Up, Thumbs Down weekend review. The reason I bring this up
I'm going to drink beers and smoke cigarettes and stiff.
The reason...
I got to find a way to be masculine after Hamlet and furniture shopping.
The reason I bring this up is Winter Olympics is starting. There's an NBC Sports Winter Olympics takeover. Yeah. If you want to find your soccer this weekend, Spurs v Arsenal and then the rest of the Premier League programme is on CNBC. CNBC, which I believe is the business news channel.
Sure.
Yeah? Sounds right.
I watch a lot of CNBC.
CNBC
I don't.
Is where you find your Premier League soccer this weekend. Hey, Taylor.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, amigo.
Listeners, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again when there's a new US soccer president. I think I might intro it with me admitting that I don't actually know who Voltron is, which I think would be a...
Not sure I do either.
Oh, okay. Maybe we shouldn't go with Voltron then? What else is assembled from various parts? Apart from Frankenstein.
And really, it's actually
You mean Frankenstein's monster?
Oh, God.
What does anyone listen to?
Dorks.